What's going on? I'm Bobby J. This is City Chapters Podcast. Today's chapter 21 with Jon Totten. Jon is the founder and executive director of Dogsmile Adventures, a nonprofit sailing adventure organization based out of Sandpoint, Idaho. Dogsmile Adventures is focused on veterans, local youth, and other underserved communities because they matter. Our veterans have sacrificed greatly for our safety and have been widely unsupported when they return home. Our youth are our future. People need our help, and it's time we give it to them. While their focus is on underserved communities, such as veterans, local youth, victims or domestic violence, and those struggling with drug and alcohol addiction, their programs are open to anyone interested in experiencing the healing power of sailing. Their intention is to offer therapeutic sailing experiences to anyone in our community who'd like to participate. This program is for everyone. Here's a quote from Jon explaining the meaning of a dog smile. Dog smile is an expression of unadulterated happiness. You're so happy that you don't care about how you look or how you're seen or what anyone else thinks. It's the biggest grin possible. The more teeth, the better. This part is key as it scares away the haters and those who simply are unaware. Jon Totten, what's going on?
Hey, man.
I'm glad to have you here, man. So
Happy to be here.
yeah, me and Jon met first at a wilderness first aid class I took at the end of last year. And then again, he was an instructor for my avalanche course. And that's how me and Jon got to know each other. And then the week after my avalanche course, I was lucky enough to go out with them in the backcountry, side country of Schweitzer, and join them for a day. And me and Jon got to talking more about his, dog smile business and his love for sailing and some things that he had going on in that world. And I was like, sounds awesome to have you on the podcast. So here we are.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Happy to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you too. So we'll just start from the beginning. You were born in Wisconsin. What part were you born in?
I grew up on a dairy farm in west central Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little town called Melrose. But yeah, along the, near the Mississippi River, about middle of the state on the west side.
Okay.
Yep.
The middle, and so I wanted to know, do you have any special stories of growing up out there that led to your love of the outdoors or sailing? I know the Great Lakes are out there, so I was wondering if sailing kind of came from the Great Lakes, maybe? Okay.
I didn't start sailing until I was in my 20s.
Okay.
Out here.
Yeah.
I would say, I grew up working on the farm outside all the time. My dad was a hunter. So I grew up hunting and I did some fishing as a kid and was always just outdoors in general. But I was able to join some canoe trips when I was a young man that really kind of set me on the path towards guiding and outdoor leadership. One of my father's good buddies used to organize canoe trips for high school kids, and they would go up to the Boundary Waters in Canada or northern Minnesota. And I finally got to go. I don't know, I was 14, 15 years old. And I remember, those were really hard. Canoeing from lake to lake. So you paddle across the lake, and then you had to carry your stuff, including your canoe, overland to the next lake. And so it was these epic wilderness trips and just awesome. I had the best time. But I remember specifically on a trip, I don't know if it was the first or second year that I went, we encountered a group that was out there, and you didn't see many people, but we encountered another group that was out there, and I remember looking across the lake, and all their boats matched, and all their jackets matched, and everything was the same, and they looked very together. And I looked at our crew, and it was a bit of a yard sale and not organized and so on. I remember asking Steve, my dad's friend, I was like, what's the deal with that group over there? And he said, oh, that's a commercially guided trip here.
Yeah.
And I was like, what does that mean? And he said, no, and he could point out, he's like, look, and he could point out the guides because they didn't look like everybody else. and they had it together and were in charge. And he said, that's their job to take these people canoeing. And I remember looking at him like, that's a job,
Yeah.
and he looked right at me and he's like, yeah, you should do that. And it's funny, and I've been doing that for 25 years now. I've really not had too many other jobs. But yeah, that trip as a kid put me on the track. And Steve's the one who inspired me to move to Idaho. I moved to Idaho when I was 18 and was directly tracked into an outdoor leadership program at University of Idaho down in Moscow.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. But it all started back there in Wisconsin and the Boundary Waters doing canoe trips.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So your first trip at 14, you knew from that moment basically like, I want to be in this world and be a guide of some sort.
Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate. Like
that's awesome.
I found a calling as a very young man.
Yeah.
And haven't really changed and still don't. It's evolved, for sure. But I really have no intention of doing anything else at this point.
Yeah. That's really cool. I mean, and that is such a blessing because to find like your purpose at such a young age, I think there's a lot of people that go through their whole life maybe not finding it, or it being obscure to them.
Right.
But you finding yours on your first canoeing trip. My dad's from the East Coast, so he did some canoe trips when he was younger, similar. I've never been on one like that. I've been on a rafting trip out here, but the canoe trips, they sound super fun and like, unique.
Yep.
And a whole different experience, especially being over on that side of the Americas. So how long were those trips? Like a week or 2 weeks? How long
They
was the
were
trip
7 to
typically?
10 days usually. Yeah. So they
a
were
good
long.
trip for a young kid. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So so at 18 you came over to Idaho. You said your dad's friend Steve is the one that told you to come to Idaho. What was his reasons? Had he been here before, or like is it just what was like kind of his inspiration for you to come here?
Yeah, no, this guy's name was Steve Frederick, and he went to the University of Idaho for his master's degree after Vietnam.
Oh, okay.
Because those guys are that age. Yeah. And when I remember being 17 and like, all I knew is I didn't want to be a dairy farmer at the time. I really wanted to go do something else for a while. And Steve and I had a very candid conversation, and he said, you should go out west for a few years and just stretch your legs, see something else, and then you can always come back, you know? And I remember having that talk with him and was, in between, I had been accepted to the University of Wisconsin and other places, but I was considering Idaho. And that fall, the fall of my senior year in high school, Steve died suddenly of a heart attack. And that was it. I was like, the last conversation I had with the man was him telling me to go to Idaho. And so, especially that young, it really impacted me. And it was like, nope, my mind was made up. I'm going.
Yeah. So in a kind of sad way, his death was like really secured your choice.
Made it happen.
Yeah.
Yep. And that was in 1998.
Yeah.
I moved out here. Yeah.
So, how big was the dairy farm that you lived on? Was it large? I don't know anything about that world.
Yeah. It was large at the time.
Yeah.
Dairy was just, it was in that phase of a lot of small family farms, but it was starting to consolidate. Now the dairy farms in America are massive, thousands of cows.
Right.
And they're like factory farm. You hear that term, that really, we were in between. We were large for our neighborhood, but we only had like 100 or 150 cows. And so it wasn't.
You guys weren't running a factory.
Not like it is now.
Right.
And so it was still very much like each family kind of had their own thing. Yep.
Was there any pressure from your dad to be in the business, or Did you have other brothers that were older, or how did that
No,
kind of?
not really. Dad, I'm sure, would have been pleased to have me stay, but was also supportive of me going to live my own life as well. And so it was, not direct pressure for sure. And, it's all kind of worked out in the end. But no, I have an older sister who's there. And, the farm has evolved a lot since then. We don't have a dairy farm anymore. We own property and rent it. But it's simplified significantly since those days. Dad's retired and is there and still manages all the facilities and so on. But we rent the property and don't run much. The business is quite small now.
Yeah.
And my sister and I actually run it kind of together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So
Yep.
got your hands all over, huh?
It's still going on, man. Yeah, it's cool though. I mean, it's
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Man.
Dad built a heck of a thing there.
Yeah.
And we're all really proud of it. And and it'll be interesting to see how it evolves over time for sure.
Sweet. Cool. So yeah, I just wanted to hear a little bit about that, more. I was like, what's it like growing up in a dairy farm in Wisconsin? Because that's like, obviously kind of the mecca, it seems like, of dairy farms. So
I'll tell you, I was just talking about this with somebody, when you're a kid, you just know your universe, right? It's that's it, right? That's all you've ever seen. That's what you know. And I didn't really understand how good I had it until much later in life. I attribute most of what I've accomplished in my work and life really to that farm upbringing.
Yeah.
I have a work ethic that's like ingrained in my system. Like we had to get up at 5:30 in the morning to milk cows before school, go to school. I played sports as a kid and I always had practice, but then, after practice, I would have to go home and milk cow, do chores again.
Yeah.
And work all weekend and work all summer long. And I was like a part of the business and was made to feel that way. And so I had a role, whereas most of my friends' parents, they like exited the building to go work in some place that most of them didn't really know much about. Like I worked alongside my dad every day for the vast majority of my memorable childhood.
Yeah.
And so I learned what it takes to be a part of something and how to get up early and get things done. And that work ethic and commitment to the team is something that I carry now in everything I do. And I don't often give enough credit to like the way I was raised and how unique it is. And how it has applied to what I do now and really anything. It's a big piece of who I am is that dairy farm childhood. It's a big deal.
Yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to come back to it, because I was thinking, I'm like, that's not the responsibilities of a child growing up on a farm. It's different. It's you have to work, you have to pull your ends, and be a part of what's going on here.
Yeah.
And so that has to reinforce, like you said, a great work ethic and these different attributes that help you now.
Yeah, and the self-confidence that it takes to do it. Like you say the word responsibility. Like I got handed the keys to like large machinery way before I had a driver's license. I mean, driving tractors and stuff that like if you mess up could easily kill you. Or if you crash it, it's, tens of thousands of dollars in equipment and damage. And Dad would be like, all right, see you later. Go.
Yeah.
Like you take off driving this machine across the countryside doing whatever it needed to be done at like the age of 12, 13. Like, and I think about the 12-year-olds I meet now, I'm like, wow, man, if you saw the action that I saw at that age. Yeah. But I think that's really helped me, especially working in the wilderness or at sea, in saying like, all right, people now, they hand me, you know, $1 million sailboat and say, off you go, you know, and I'll get on it and drive it. And I'm still nervous, but I think about, that responsibility level as a kid was so much higher. The risk involved and the resources that I had my hands on were significant by comparison to most people I've met. They just didn't have that in there as a kid.
I mean, it's just, it makes a big difference for sure. I mean, I like this kind of stuff, and this is why I like the backstory, you know, and I like diving into it a little bit, you know, because I could stay here all day, because I really like to think about how people get formed, you know, and like as a child, that's what you're downloaded with, whatever your experiences are as a child, like that is hardwired into you, and it goes into a big part of who you become in life. And so having this experience, like working on a farm, I had friends that, you know, grew up on a farm outside of Medical Lake. And one of them, he like basically is running the farm now. But I mean, these guys were hardened, tough, fun, but tough dudes, you know, and also work. Like the work ethic is just crazy, you know. And I had some experiences working for my dad young in the car wash industry. And I was probably way too young to be around some of the things I was around, equipment and things like kind of in a similar situation. But it wasn't every day, you know, and it didn't start till later on. I imagine from the time you were basically capable, you were assisting in some kind of way, you know, as soon as you're walking, like you're doing something on the farm, you know? And so,
you're in the mix as soon as you're useful.
You're going to work. So that's really cool, man. And goes to show like how you've been able to, I don't know, really create your own life and, you know, have the work ethic to do so. So we'll get more into the college now, because we got a good chunk of, you know, what that was like growing up on the farm. So at 18, you come to Idaho. Your dad's friend Steve tells you to come out here. So that answers why you chose the U of I. What initially, when you were coming to the college, you applied for the program, for the outdoor program, or whatever it was called?
Yeah, you know, initially I wasn't. I was looking into more like parks, fishing game, maybe even forestry. I was kind of, you know, not terribly sure, but I knew I wanted to work outside. And the guiding piece, you know, I'd been introduced to it, but I didn't really know how to go about making that happen. And when I got to Moscow, I was a part of a pre-freshman orientation backpacking trip. That awesome. I had signed up. My parents had signed me up for something like before we ever, you know, ever came out here. And so within like literally what seemed like minutes, like as soon as I got to Moscow, I was meeting up with this group to pack for this backpacking trip that was going to happen the week before we all started college. And the characters on that trip were the people that really helped me focus my direction. The people that led that, it was a guy named Keith Russell, another guy named Mike Beiser, and they were organizing this thing. And we went on this, like, we went straight into the Selway Crags, which is like some of the deepest wilderness in the state. It's amazing. And, you know, coming from the dairy in Wisconsin, it's like going to the moon. I mean, it was really dramatic. And I got to watch these guys lead this trip. And I was just enamored with it. And by the end of the week, I was, in the outdoor program. I think my first job there was like cleaning the vans, you know, and helping with equipment. But I got to go on all the trips every weekend. And so I was just plugged in immediately and never really looked back. So there was upon arrival in Moscow,
once again,
I got tracked right into it. It's
pretty wild how things for you just kind of like, boom, canoe trip. Boom, you get to university. You're going on an outdoor trip you didn't even expect. And then it's just like guiding you into the right place. So what was the outdoor program called? What was like the official title of it that you were in?
So there's the academic program at the time was called Resource Recreation and Tourism. Now I think it's called Conservation and Social Science, but it was basically people in the outdoors, you know. And then there's a campus recreation program that is the outdoor program. So there's the academic and then the non-academic side of it, and I was doing both.
Yeah.
So I was learning, you know, the human history of recreation in the country and how it's kind of managed now, and the private industry and public lands and all that type of thing in class. But then on every weekend, we were packing up to go whitewater rafting or backpacking or skiing or whatever. And so I was getting the real nuts and bolts, like the leadership, and then all these hard skills. You know, I grew up, like I say, I'd paddled a canoe a few times, but I'd never skied. I'd never.
Oh, really?
No.
I mean,
not
being
once.
in Wisconsin,
Yeah,
but like,
it wasn't. There just wasn't a thing, you know. And so I just hadn't done. Certainly hadn't ever run any whitewater rivers or climbed a mountain of any significance or anything like that. So I was getting all the hard skills at the same time and then learning the theory on the other side of it. So it was a immersive few years for sure. Yeah.
What was the wilderness? You said you went on the
Selway Bitterroot is where I
Selway
started.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. Man. So you did, that's a 4-year program?
Yep.
What would you say are some of the most important things you came away with after that program, as far as like personal, career, whatever you might feel that's the most important things you grabbed during that time?
I think the most important piece was the fact that it became clear to me that this was a real thing. It was a bit of a fantasy as
like
a
you
kid.
could live in this world, life. You could actually do this.
Like I met people who made their career outdoor leadership. You know, so they were guides and instructors and a lot of a mix of both. And I met folks that were traveling and working seasonally. You know, they'd work a season on the river over here. They'd go ski there. They would, do different things. And at that age, it became possible. Like I met people who were doing the thing for real. That was a huge piece, probably the biggest piece.
Yeah.
And then it was the frequency of exposure to the outdoors and just really realizing that I don't like to work inside. I like if I could be able to make money outside of a building, I'm going to try and do that.
Yeah.
Like it's really that simple,
I love
and
that.
and I know that that's really basic, but it's not that common, without doing a hard labor job. Like I remember one summer, my first summer in Idaho, I had to stay in order to get residency because I was paying out-of-state tuition my first year, and I had applied for a ton of scholarships and did quite well and was able to afford that because I didn't have like a college fund. My parents didn't have a ton of money. I got a $300 check a month from my mother. That was it. And that was for living expense. And other than that, I was on my own to pay for this. And so I needed to get state residency in order to lower my tuition and so on. And so I got a concrete job in town, and it was brutal. I mean, we built the Moscow City Pool. Anybody that's listening knows, like, that place is this huge, like, city pool. And I was there every day, all summer, carrying rebar up and down. I was the low man on the concrete crew. I worked hard. And so it was like, okay, these guys work outside every day, but this is awful. This is really hard. And I was like, okay, I want to work outside, but like, I don't want to do labor. And so it really, like, it attuned me to the guiding and outdoor instruction. Like, if I can crack this code and figure out how to do it and make money, I want to try and do that. And that's what came out of those 4 years down there was that like understanding that it could be done and meeting people that were doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, like you said, meeting people that were doing it is a huge part, because the general public would limit the belief that you could live that life, right? A lot of times you hear like, oh, how are you really going to do that? Like, how are you going to make money doing that's a general consensus. Now, there's people that believe in dreams and will support it, but, there's always, people, even my father, he's always been like, oh, play the safer route a lot of times. Like, how are you going to make that happen? And it's like, anything's possible, but not anything is possible to everybody, And I think it's, even like me taking your course and like seeing how you've structured your life has been an inspiration to me in a lot of different ways. And like, I don't know where I'm going to go with it and being a guide or not. That's not really the point. The point is that I just want to get deeper into having outdoor skills, and like getting, more away from like the general use of outdoors, like whether it's the resort, like the best days I had this season, I had some good days in the resort, no doubt. But the best days were the days where I was split boarding and hiking in the backcountry with a few friends, or even that day with you guys. Like, I had a blast. I didn't know any of you well, met you briefly, in the class, but that was like such an awesome day, out in the backcountry. I was just smiling the whole time, and so it's cool, like once you kind of seek out something or something nudges you into this way, it kind of does show you like, oh, wow, there are people out here that just don't live on TV, that are really doing this in my local community or whatever it is. So, yeah, seeing people in action doing what you have an aspiration to do, I think really helps make it chewable. Like, all right, okay, all right, this is how he did it, or, whatever it is. And you see it in action, it makes you really be able to grab it, So,
for sure.
So after graduation, you became a professional outdoor educator for 12 years at the North Idaho College in their outdoor pursuits program.
Yep.
That's 12 years. That's a good chunk of time. So how did that job come about? You obviously, you're at University of Idaho, you're getting the skills to become a guide. Through that program, I guess one more question in there is, were you like, once it started, were you thinking like, I want to become a guide specifically? Is that an instructor guide is kind of what your aim was towards once you started in it?
Yeah, initially I wanted to go right into guiding, commercial guiding, but it was just circumstantial, really. The nature of the academic program, it had these mandatory field courses that happened right after school got out in the spring. And in order to finish my degree on time, I had to do these field courses, but they happened right when the whitewater guide trainings happened. And so that was a critical piece, because I never became a raft guide until much later, because I missed the trainings to do those field studies. And so what ended up happening was I got tracked into campus recreation through just the people that I was around and seeing these, outdoor pursuits type programs on college campuses. Those are the folks that were influencing me the most, and I enjoyed it. And so that's how I ended up at NIC in Coeur d'Alene. Was a guy named Paul Chivas, we were students together and who we worked together at University of Idaho. He came up to Coeur d'Alene, took over this outdoor pursuits program at this little community college on the lake. And I remember I was passing through town one time, and he's like, "You got to stop by this campus." And so I stopped by, and we were standing on the beach, the college beach down there. This would have been like 2002. And he's like, "I think I'm going to be able to create a position up here as for an assistant to help me run this program." He's like, "Do you want to do that?" And I was like, Yeah, man, I'm down.
Yeah.
And I went down to Moscow and I worked like part-time in town and kind of had just a good year down there. But then the following spring is when I moved to Coeur d'Alene. That would have been the spring of 2003. And I took the job at North Idaho College, running the rental side of the program. We rent equipment to the student body and the community. And then I was, leading a lot of trips for students as well. And that 12 years is broken into 2 chapters, really.
Okay.
I was there for 4 years as the assistant coordinator of the program. And at the time, I was also going to night school. I'm like the last guy that went to night school. I got my master's from the University of Idaho, but I was in Coeur d'Alene. And we had class like a couple days a month. And it was when online college was really in its fledgling stage and it didn't really work that well. I'm not sure it works that well now either, but that's another topic for another time. But I got my master's in education at night and was the assistant with that program. And when I finished my master's, during that 4 years is when I got into sailing. I learned to sail on the lake. I inherited 5 sailboats with that program, and I'd never been sailing ever. And but I was into like anything outdoors, especially water. I was like, I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
And I fell into this community of sailors on Lake Coeur d'Alene, and they were awesome people. And I really got the bug and got into it there. And so when I finished my master's, I got my captain's license also, which was like barely qualified at the time to be called a captain of anything. And I left the college and went sailing. I went to the San Juan Islands and worked as a sailing instructor. And then I went to the Caribbean for the first time. And so there was a 4-year period at the college. Then I went sailing for like a year and a half.
Just being an instructor, though, or a guide.
Yep. I was an instructor, and then my buddy Paul, that guy who got me the gig at the college in the first place, moved on. He moved into a different position at the college, and so the director position of the program came open. So I went back. I went back to Coeur d'Alene after about a year and a half of sailing. I went back to Coeur d'Alene and ran the program then for 8 years. And that went up until 2015. So there's a 12 years total, but there was a little intermission.
Intermission of
My
sailing.
first attempt at being a professional sailor was in the mix there as well. Yep.
Well, I mean, I would say you did it though. It wasn't an attempt, right? I mean, you just got a job offer that was like, all right, I'll take that. I mean, but you were on track, it sounds like. I mean, I don't know. I'm assuming so. You did a year and a half. I mean, you went out, went to the San Juan Islands. I have to ask about the San Juan Islands. I've been out there once to Orca Island. That place is absolutely gorgeous.
That's great.
But they have, is it the southern residents orcas there, or is it the northern? I think they intermix there a little bit in that intersection, but there's kind of like a boundary line. But
there are multiple pods, and so there are resident pods, and then there are the transient pods that come through. And I'll be honest, I am not an expert on which ones, but I know that we spent a lot of time trying to have orca encounters out there on the sailboat, and often did. We saw a lot of whales out there.
I'm obsessed with orcas. I've read a lot about them, and I have something yearning in my heart to somehow learn how to volunteer over there, So I was just going to ask, do you have like a really special experience or moment with a pod of orcas? Is there like one that sticks out to you?
I remember my first like close encounter really well. Yeah. Yep. We were out sailing off, it would be the west side of San Juan Island, which is commonly where you encounter them out there. I forget the name of the strait, Harrow Strait, maybe.
That sounds familiar from the
maybe.
book.
I'm not sure.
And there's a popular beach that you can watch from
Right.
there as well and see them.
So we were sailing out there, and at the time I knew someone from Friday Harbor that worked on a whale watching boat, and so she would get me some beta because they had eyes in the sky and they knew where they were, and so she would give me some beta, and so we would sail out there with my sailing students and see if we can, maybe we'll see some whales. We don't have the mobility of the whale watching boats on the sailboat, and so we're just kind of making our way and hoping for the best. But I'll never forget it. We're going along and we could see a couple fins, we're like, whoa, there's some. And they were probably, 100 yards away. And I was like, this is neat. We're watching. And then literally from you to me, no exaggeration, this fin just starts coming up out of the water, and it's this big male.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's a 6-foot dorsal fin, and it came up, and that fish in my head, right? I know it's not a fish, was bigger than the boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was on. And I'd never been that close to an animal that big before.
Yeah.
And it came up, and what I remember was its eyeball was like a grapefruit, easy, if not bigger. Mm-hmm. And that thing looked right at me.
Yeah.
Like, and they're predators, right? They're the wolves of the sea, like pack hunters.
Yeah.
And so they're not like a fish that seems to just be like surveying the scene. That orca like looks right at you.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that, and being like, just holding the wheel of the sailboat, like,
wow.
and the guests are like, some of them are really scared. Some of them are like leaning over the edge to take a picture. But I'll never forget that was like point blank range.
Yeah.
And that's as close as I've ever been since, was that first time.
That's a unique experience.
I'll never forget that. But yeah. Have you ever been to the Whale Museum in Friday Harbor on Orcas Island? If you're into it, that needs to go on your list.
I don't think I did go there.
Yeah. It's
it's
like the most thorough, amazing orca like download.
Okay.
I
was going to make my way over there this year.
It's an absolutely, and that would be a place where, because there's a foundation over there that works to protect the orcas, and so that would be an avenue for you to try to connect with. And I'm sure there's volunteer opportunities.
I've looked at several of the ones over there. One that interests me is Orca Conservancy, and I don't know if they're based off the San Juans or not, but yeah, there's definitely a few, and yeah, I'm gonna make it happen, man. I started reading some books because I was like, if I go over there, I want to know something other than like, oh, I saw Free Willy and I want to, be near orcas or something, right? But I mean, man, they're just like, I dream of orcas, so like I have a lot of like my spiritual dreams have orcas in them, and I don't know, man. There's just something like. And on my bucket list is like to be near an orca,
Cool.
Like, that's like the one thing and I can think of doing in my life that like gets my heart going, and so that's anyway, knowing that you were sailing over there, I figured you had some kind of unique and amazing experience with an orca. And
they're pretty special.
I've heard from, just the book that I read and how they describe has that 6 foot, if it's a male, that 6 foot dorsal coming out of the water, and then the way they look at you is very intent and purposeful, and like they are looking at you and seeing what's going on, and so
cool.
Anyway, a little side jump there. So then, okay, so you leave the program, you're there for about 4 years, you leave the program, the pursuits program at NIC. You go over to San Juan for about half a year, or
I did the summer in the San Juan. I did 2 summers in the San Juan Islands. Mm-hmm. So that would have been, you head over there in May, finish in September.
Okay.
But then in between, I got my first chance to go to the Caribbean.
All right.
And so I moved to the island of St. Vincent, and I worked for a charter sailing company and sailing school called Barefoot Yacht Charters. Yep.
That's a cool name.
And that was a big deal in my life to go down there, and had connections from Coeur d'Alene that made that happen.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And ended up down, I got down there, and the sailing school boat was this old 1977 Gibbsy 44 named Ondado, I remember. And I lived on the boat. And then I would run sailing school programs, and this thing was rode hard. Man, that boat could have sank at any moment. Like, it was really this beat down thing.
Sketchy,
But I was I didn't care.
Yeah.
I was like, I worked tirelessly to repair that boat and keep it running, and I was a sailboat captain in the Caribbean, man. It was a big deal. Yeah. I was 27, I think. Wow. And 26, 27, something like that. And so that was a wild season. I learned so much, got into so many tight spots and like near misses and just barely pulling it off, because I didn't know what I was doing. I learned as I went, and then, did another summer in the San Juans after that. And then it was in the fall that I got the news and decided not to go back to the islands, to come back here and do the campus rec thing, and give that a full effort. And it turned out it was great. And I wound up back in those islands years later, because it never quite left my mind. But there was 8 years in Coeur d'Alene running the outdoor pursuits program at NIC, and that was where I really kind of grew up into my philosophy of outdoor leadership and things like that, because I had employees and interns and hundreds of students during that time. Yeah. And so I got a lot of reps and really started to tune my beliefs about outdoor leadership and things like that, and just got a ton of real experience, and then also learned politics. And I was a part of a large institution where we had to haggle for budget money and try to build facilities, and it was in these committee meetings with faculty and administration and so on, learn to communicate in groups and committee chair and things like that, and those were those are great skills, life skills that your average guide does not get. And so that's a piece of that time that was tremendously valuable, especially with what I'm doing now, in that I had to run meetings in those days and get things done. And at a place where, the larger the institution, the more the bureaucracy tends to hold everything in this status quo. So it's hard to innovate. It's hard to change. It's not nimble in any way. And so to make things happen was difficult, and you had to power through red tape and push. And I got a lot done, especially in the last few years I was there. We were able to make changes and grow the program and build buildings and do a lot. And so it was great. But towards the end, I also kind of started to burn out. Was like spending more time in meetings than I was out doing the thing. And it started to get to me.
Taken away from your original
intent.
I
was like, God, I'm just, and
I'm indoors more than I'm out.
Way more. And it started to kind of go, I'm too young. I remember at one point being like, I'm too young to go to meetings for a living. Yeah. I don't want to do this. And I felt like I was just constantly, and I wasn't outside as much as I wanted. My staff and my students were out doing most of the trips. And I was just making it all happen. And I was like, well, that's all well and good. Selfishly, I was like, I'm not sure this is for me. Yeah. And that's when I started to get the itch, and like, it's like, well, maybe I want to go back out and go be a guide again and go do the job instead of talk about doing the job all the time, which is kind of what I was doing. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, obviously leading a program for 8 years, you're going to gain a ton of skill sets, especially for a college. I think that in itself, like you said, is very unique. It's not just a program within a college. Like you said, the politics and the things you have to do to make things happen are probably more difficult than any other kind of business model, maybe. It would seem just how college is. Second only to government, I would say.
Yeah, government, yes. Right? Yeah. Government would be difficult as well, I'd imagine. So, When you left the program, did you go back to a sailing career again? Or?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, towards the end of my time at the college, I started river guiding because I never got to be a raft guide
Yeah.
because of the circumstances. And so I was like, I'm going to carve out a couple weeks a year and get my guide's license. And I want to be a raft guide, And so I was like the oldest rookie raft guide, technically a rookie, and I had lots of experience. So I rose fairly quickly, but so I started guiding on the Salmon River for a company called Hughes River Expeditions. The last few years I was at the college. And then when I left NIC, I had this kind of endless summer life for a while, for like 5 years. I did about 8 months in the Caribbean, running sailboats. And then the rest of the year I was in Idaho raft guiding. And so I went back and forth from Idaho to the islands, for about 5 years.
So were you wintering in the Caribbean typically? Okay.
Yep. I'd head down there in the fall and come back here in the spring.
Man.
Yep.
Just living on the water.
It was. Yeah. It was, the best time in my life for sure. I mean, I tell people all the time, I've had more fun than any 3 people I've ever met. I really am spoiled in that way. And so it was lots of working, teaching sailing, guiding river trips, and just doing the thing. And an invaluable time for sure. I got a lot of days out and got to work with amazing people and places. I mean, the conditions these are 2 world-class venues for the things that I was doing.
Yeah.
And so it was tremendous. It was a good run.
So you basically been around the majority of the Caribbean then, I would imagine.
I've seen a lot of it for sure.
There's a lot of islands down there. I don't
There's a lot.
People, I don't even fully understand it, right? I know you hear the Caribbean, you think, there's like a few islands, but there's like hundreds, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like
there's
hundreds
a lot. There's so many. You could spend a lifetime poking around down there.
Right.
We lived in Grenada in the Southern Caribbean. And so that's what and so we were based there and did most of our trips in that between, St. Vincent and Grenada in the little islands called the Grenadines down there that are super special. Southern Caribbean's a little windier than the central, where you have the Virgin Islands and things like that. Yeah, that are very, very popular places. So there's there's more breeze. It's better sailing by a significant margin, I would say, and not as busy. There's not as many people. There's not as many cruise ships. It's not as built up, and so it's a little wilder down there.
That's cool.
Which is not for the average tourist. Doesn't want that, and so it was kind of great. But yeah, we got to move boats around. We did some delivery work. We were associated with a yacht brokerage, and so we got to move some boats on occasion, and then you'd see other places. And then we also got to bring boats up to the east coast of the U.S., and so we got to do the crossings from there down to bring boats down to the islands and back, which were big trips. And so we got to do...
How long of a trip would that be? Like,
depends on which way you're going. But, you'd spend, 7 to 10 days out moving boat in between. So not quite like ocean crossing distances, but like pretty long trips, multiple days offshore, no land anywhere, and doing the thing. So yeah, we got to see a lot of it, and got to know, especially our backyard in the Grenadines, like we got attached to the locals and became family with these people. That was tremendous. I have a goddaughter in this little island called Carriacou named Angelique. Yep.
that's so cool.
Yeah, because her dad came to us and wanted to start his own lobster barbecue thing on this little island, and we were we were his pilot groups when he first started his little barbecue our guests were the only people that got to. It was so exclusive. It was so cool.
Yeah.
And Tim messed it up a few times, but he like tuned his thing,
Yeah.
and we got to help him do that. And now he's got this like dynamite thing. But
Wow.
he was so grateful. He like named my buddy and I the godfathers of his daughter. Like it was a big deal, you know.
Awesome.
I always stay with him when I'm there, and it's been a while now. I haven't seen those folks in a few years, but yeah, we got super entrenched in the place and the people down there, and it was fantastic. The lesson that I took away from the island folk was their seeming not quite universal, but like very cultural detachment from material things. Those folks, especially the ones that lived in the country, they didn't have a lot, you know, but they were the most whole humans I'd ever met.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't moan, they didn't complain, you know, show up barefoot, and they have a very small wardrobe and no vehicle, a lot of them, and like it's completely content with what they had. And as you know, we live in this country that's so materialistic and profit driven, and it had a huge impact on me to be around those people and to be like, wow, what's this all about? Why are they so happy? You know, and it was really good for me to be down there, and it had a big impact on kind of how I would move forward when I left the Caribbean. Yeah.
I've had a few experiences. One in Mexico, I went to a village like way out in the Mayan jungle, and like they had nothing out there, but they were so happy, you know, like just so happy, you know, and very family orientated, and just smiles, and you know, no shoes, whatever, right? And living in makeshift huts, but like you could just tell they were like just I don't know what it is, but it's like they have something us Americans want to find, you know. We can't find it. We're so unhappy because of our search for always accumulating and like need more and more and more, and like trying to keep up with the Joneses and trying to be better than the next man, and like this whole thing that we get caught up into. And I try my best to practice detachment and minimizing too. Like I'm trying to be a minimalistic person. Like I've gotten rid of so much, and I still have so much more to get rid of. But like even recently, like over this season, I accumulated a few snowboards, and then I'm only riding one, you know? And I'm like, I'm selling these other ones. I don't need them. I don't need the quiver, you know, as the snowboarders call it. Like, or maybe skiers call it quivers too. I don't know. But
For sure.
yeah, I'm like, I don't need a quiver. I got a quiver killer. That's all I need, you know? Like, I need that one deck. I have my split board too, you know? I have my solid and my split, and then I have a backup deck. But I don't need these other ones when I can ride this one and everything.
Right.
And it just feels good, like getting rid of stuff and like detaching from this whole concept of we need more and more and more. So it's something that I'm practicing more intentionally within the last like probably couple years, but like within this last year especially. Like I have one, like I'm getting rid of jeans. Like I have one good pair of jeans that I like to wear. They're the only ones I need. And now I got another blue pair, you know, black and blue. It's like that's all I need, you know? Plenty. Yeah. So and when I go somewhere to travel, I'm like, I don't need to bring all this crap, man. Or now I'm learning, like, packing my bag. Like, what do I absolutely need? And what are things I don't, you know? So, but out in the backcountry, as you've taught too, like, you probably need whatever you can get out there, you know, with safety precautions at least. So, I mean, that's really, I mean, I've always dreamed of going to the Caribbean, and you just having these experiences, man. It's just like, you know, you're living a unique chapter in the world story, I feel. You know, the way you live your life, man, is it's inspiring. That's why I wanted to have you on and learn more about it. What was one thing from the Caribbean before we move on, like another special story from there? Do you have one that sticks out above the others that would be like a unique, special experience that you had down there?
Man, so many.
I know it's hard to choose, I'm sure.
You know, let's see here. I think the one that, I guess the one that's coming up right now would be, I went to pick up a boat in St. Lucia one time there was a mutiny on this delivery crew. They had sailed this boat from Europe across the Atlantic, and it was meant to be delivered to St. Vincent. And they got to St. Lucia, which is close, but not the same island. And they abandoned the boat, like tied it to a concrete dock and left it. And yep. And this is when I was working for Barefoot Yacht Charter. This is my first season in the Caribbean.
Okay.
And I remember getting woke up. I wasn't on charter that day. I got woke up in the morning, banging on the side of the boat, like, John. Mother Mary was the boss. She owned the company. Mother Mary wants to see you. And I was like, oh no, what did I do? I had partied the night before and figured I must have like left something untied or started a fire or who knows. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to get fired. I was convinced. I got in my dinghy and motored in and walked up to the office, like banged up, and went in, and Mary came out of her office and she handed me a plane ticket and says, go get my boat, and walked away. And I'm standing there like, what is happening? And the other guys fill me in about the mutiny and the, like, this boat's been abandoned. It was a Grand Soleil. It's like a 48-foot, really nice monohull sailboat, like a beauty. And it was meant to be coming into the charter fleet, and it was abandoned up there. Owner was flying in because the owner had heard about what happened, and so there was this very touchy situation where they were worried that the boat would get pulled out of the charter fleet and so on. So they sent me up there, and I met the owner, and our instructions were to walk down the dock, untie it, and leave. So the problem there is that you're supposed to check yachts in and out of through customs and immigration. Didn't happen. I met dude who was a actual rocket scientist, not kidding, real deal. Yeah, had sailed that boat around the world 3 times.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty attached, furious with what was going on. We get on the boat. He doesn't know me, who I'm like total rookie. This guy's circumnavigated 3 times. I haven't sailed 2,000 miles total at that point.
Wow.
We get on the boat, and it's like tied to this like industrial dock. There's like barges being loaded and stuff. There's no sailboats anywhere. And we just walked down, got on. We didn't talk to anyone. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Get on the boat, untie, and drive away.
Yeah.
And so we did it. And this guy, the owner, was super sick. I remember he was like wheezing, super ill. And he's like, all right, I'm going to go lay down. You take the first watch. I'll be up in 2 hours, you know. And we're on the south end of St. Lucia, and so we're immediately right out into fairly big water. There's the channels between those islands. There's, you know, big waves and so on. We had a following breeze. The head sail, the sail on the front of the boat it was damaged, and so all we had was the big mainsail, but it was fine because we're going downwind, whatever. And the guy's like, "I'm gonna lay down. You take it." Sun is setting at this point, so we're taking off into the night to go sail down to St. Vincent, which is like, I don't know, 12 hours or something to get down there, maybe 18. And I will never forget that night as long as I live. Old boy was sick. Obviously didn't set an alarm. And so he just kept sleeping. And I sailed that boat all the way to St. Vincent alone all night. And was listening to, I'll never forget it. I listened to Johnny Cash live at Folsom Prison on repeat, just over and over the concert, you know, and just the mainsail was big following seas. So these big waves coming up under it, and that boat was fast. And so it would surf. It was a 40 something foot boat, would plane out and surf down the waves. until you get in the trough, and then you slow down because the waves are so tall, they're blocking the breeze from the sail. And the next swell comes underneath you and lifts up the back of the boat. And as soon as the mainsail starts to get above the crest of the next wave, it catches the breeze and you surf again. And you're on this repeat surfing waves for like 8 hours nonstop. And the thing would just surf down, and it was on rails because it had like a 9-foot keel under it. And so you think of, your surfboard, like that you track because of that fin. If you don't have the fin, it's loose, right?
Yeah.
This thing just straight down the waves, back and forth, back and forth. It's like 7 a.m. and I'm almost there. I've sailed down the coast of St. Vincent at this point and had great conditions. And I just remember that night, like stars and waves, being like, I'm never going to stop doing this.
Wow.
This is the coolest thing I've ever done in the great outdoors.
Yeah.
And still is in the picture. And that was a long time ago. That was like 2008,
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that night of sailing. And dude wakes up and he's like, oh, he comes out of the boat. And I'm like, hey, man, chill out. He's like, why'd you wake me up? I was like, well, you're sick. You're sleeping. I got this. In that moment, he was like, respect. Like, the dude was cool.
Yeah.
And then, so we became friends, and he like took me through all of his slideshows through 3 circumnavigations. He'd been everywhere.
Wow.
It was super inspiring. And
that is.
that was I remember he left and they fixed the boat, and then that boat never did stay in charter. I don't know what happened there, but I got to sail it all night alone. In these just ideal conditions.
Yeah.
With Johnny Cash and I remember that whole thing like it was yesterday.
That's so
that was a
cool,
big
man.
one.
So it must have been like just a rhythmic like boost, whoop, and then you boost, and then
flying super fast when the big boat that big planes
like,
out. It's
you're
like whoa, like just, and it took a few to settle in and figure out how to drive it, But then once I got it figured out, it was like, oh yeah.
Initially, it probably felt like a lot, and then it's
kind of intense. But then once you get dialed in, it kind of does it for you. Yeah, it's what it's made to do. Yeah.
Man, I'm smiling just hearing about that story, man. I think I've been smiling most of this pod.
It was a good one.
Yeah, I can see why you have named your business Dogsmile Adventures, because just the smiles that come with doing this kind of stuff. So when and what inspired you to create Dogsmile Adventures? Dogsmile Adventures,
Yeah, that's a big one. There's a harsh reality to the story. But it's it's the truth. It's the only reason that it happened. I remember a deep conversation with my good mate RJ one night down there about kind of what are we doing here? What are we going to do with this? Where's it going to go? And RJ talked about wanting to be, a professional yacht skipper for a private yacht and move up in the ranks of boats and cross oceans and do those things. And I remember that night telling him, I'm like, I want to like do this for people that can't afford it. Like, I'd like to give this away. That was the first time it ever came out of my mouth. I remember that night in the islands. That was early on. And years went by, and we, the boats got bigger, and it was cool. And I remember, so many people would say, like, to my face, like, John, how do I get your life? I want your life, and because from the outside looking in, I had it all figured out, right? I was doing Middle Fork salmon whitewater trips in the summer and running sailboats the rest of the year and making more money than I'd ever made in my life. And there's a lot of fun and so on. But what a lot of people, didn't see was that I was a full-blown alcoholic and I was addicted to cocaine. And I was towards the end of it, like 2017, 18, 19 is when it was really bad. And so I was really sad. I was super lonely. The thing about the gig is even though I'm surrounded by people all the time, it's really hard to develop relationships because they're all just passing through and they're all on vacation.
Yeah.
So you don't get the best of folks, right? They're down there to blow it out and enjoy it. But on Saturday they go home, and on Sunday you get back on the boat and go again. It's relentless and exhausting. And it's a lot of out and not a lot of in. You know, you're giving everything you have to these people to show them the best time. And it's a lot to manage too. Like the sailboat is complicated. The weather is complicated. There's a lot on your mind to manage all the risk and still show them a good time. And then you throw the party aspect on top of that. And so I was really worn down and I was in bad shape towards the end. And I was back here in Idaho, and it was the fall of 2019. And
I'm sorry to interrupt you for one moment. But you were saying kind of 2018, 19, you were kind of at your lowest in that time? Like,
yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yep. And lowest on the inside, but again, from the outside looking in,
everything,
like had it all figured
got
out.
awesome life from the outside.
Living
but
the dream, man.
Internally struggling with some things.
For sure.
Okay.
And anyway, fall 19, had a come to Jesus day and called a buddy and asked for help and checked myself into a rehab facility. Decided to try to just sober up and stop. You know, I just was a disaster. And it was tough. I left the company hanging in the islands. They had to cancel trips and reschedule. And, you know, that was a bummer for them. But also anyone who knew me well was like, yes,
he needs this.
Yep. And so I had a mountain of support. Everyone that was close to me was like, yeah, Jon, you need to, you got to get out of this cycle.
Yeah.
So I did a 30-day treatment program in Denver, Colorado. Came out of it, 39 years old, and went from, Caribbean yacht skipper to unemployed, went back to the farm, moved in with my dad, and, living in dad's basement, and became a substitute teacher at the school that I grew up going to, and spent a few months just like mainly focused on staying sober. That's a full-time job in the early stages. Still a part-time job now.
Yeah. I
understand. Anyway, I owned a sailboat in the Caribbean. I had bought a J105, a 35-foot racing sailboat down there. And we were trying to run it as a day charter business, and it was failing miserably. We weren't losing money, but it was fun. We had we had great times with it. We raced it, and that boat was down there, and I was making payments on it, and I was like, all right, the dust had settled a little bit from rehab, and I was like, I got to do something with this boat. And so I made a plan. I was going to go get the boat, and I was going to sail it from the Southern Caribbean to Galveston, Texas, put it on a truck, and truck it up to Seattle, where there's a great market for that particular boat, and sell it, and just get out of debt. Hard reset on life, right? And that was spring. That was like February 2020. And so I took off down there to go do this delivery to get the boat and get it over there and get it sold. And we left Grenada on the 15th of March. I had my buddy's wife, Jenny, a good friend of mine, who signed up for 5 days of sailing to help me. I had several legs across the Caribbean and up to Texas. I was having people who were going to join me at each leg. And there were like people getting sick in China, but I wasn't really like aware, I was like, it's not going to affect my life, I took off down there. We sailed the boat, and right while we were we were offshore underway, like Corona happened. Like it just, bomb dropped on the world. And when we got to the Virgin Islands, they were like, you got to stay here. Like you can't go anywhere. And so like screeching halt to the mission. And, I was like 3 months sober at the time. And so like changes of plans really rocked me. Like I was in a fragile state. And Jenny and I were stuck on the boat, and I was like, you should fly home, get out of here. Called her husband. He's in Denver. He's like, don't come here. stay there. And so here I am on this little boat. This is not a boat that's designed to be lived aboard.
No.
And I'm here with my good friend, and we're kind of marooned. We're like stuck.
Yeah.
And if you're going to get stuck somewhere, get stuck in St. John. Like it's nice. But anyway, we were there for a few weeks, and I called the people in Seattle that were going to buy the boat. And I was like, hey, we're delayed. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but we'll get there, And the guy very point blank was like, you need to make other plans. The deal was off. And that like floored me. And I was pacing. The boat's 11 and a half feet wide. And I was walking back and forth. And Jenny, being very stoic, she's sitting on the back of the boat. And she looked at me and she was like, John, what would you do if you could do anything you wanted? I'll never forget that.
Great question.
We're stuck there. We can't leave.
Yeah.
I was like, I would kick you off the back of the boat right now. And she laughed. And I was like, I was a mess.
Yeah.
And she just stood there and looked at me. She's like, seriously, what would you do? And I said to her, I'd give it away. I'm like, I want to give this away. This thing that we do should be free.
Yeah.
It sucks that my friends and family and most of the people I've met in my life can't afford to go sailing with me. It's the truth. Let's do something about that, And Jenny, with a background in business, goes down, gets like a yellow legal pad, and we penciled out the nonprofit sitting there in quarantine in St. John. Dogsmile Adventures became a thing. And we started making phone calls, and I was like, all right, I have connections in Idaho. Let's do it on Lake Ponderay. It'll be great. And we ended up sitting there for a while. We didn't leave for another like month. I mean, we were there for a long time, a couple months, and ended up the Bahamas opened. And so we could sail. We sailed from the Virgin Islands to the Bahamas, and then the Bahamas up to right near Fort Lauderdale, just north of Fort Lauderdale, was sailed into the St. Lucie Inlet. We went up the Okeechobee Waterway to a little place called Indiantown. So we did this big trip across the Caribbean. It's 2,000 miles. And then I flew to Wisconsin, drove my personal rig back out west here, rented a truck, 1-ton diesel Ford pickup, borrowed a trailer in Portland. So the J105 is not a trailer sailor. Like, it's a pain in the butt to get it on a trailer. So it's not a boat that you can just like dip in and haul away. So there aren't very many trailers. So friends of friends of friends, I met these guys that had a trailer in Portland. I called them from the Caribbean. They were like, what? I was like, this is my plan. Can I use your trailer? And they were like, yeah, they were into it. They run a program called Free Bowl of Soup, which is a line from Caddyshack, which is, these guys are funny and they're cool. Yeah. So they're like, sure, man, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
And so I rented the truck in Idaho, drove to Portland, got the trailer, drove all the way across America, the long way, to South Florida, or Central Florida, de-rigged the boat, loaded on, had a couple buddies help me out, which were super rad. And then I hauled the boat all the way to Bayview. All during lockdown. All that happened. That was like May, June 2020. Yeah. Everyone else is locked in their house, and I put on 24,000 miles by land, air, and sea during lockdown. Like everybody else was sitting at home. Yeah. And like I remember at one point where I wish we would have had a drone. We were driving through Atlanta, 6-lane interstate. There's no cars.
Wow.
Just us with this MAGA sailboat. Yeah. Super illegal load, by the way. Like, you're only supposed to be 8.5 feet wide going down the interstate. We're like 12. And, but you have to get a wide load permit. It's state by state. I would look at that for about 1 minute and I was like, whatever. The police are busy. Black Lives Matter protests are happening. Yeah. Quarantine. I was like, they're not going to pull over dude with a sailboat that's a little too big. Let's just go for it. Yeah. So we drove across the country with an illegal load.
No problem.
There's nobody there. There's nobody on the road. There, there's nobody out. There's a few truckers, but there's no cars. And so, we drove it all the way out and along the way, just was starting to try to figure out, like, how's this going to work? I really didn't have a plan, There was just a lot of motion. I was like, well, I want to find populations. I want to find people in this community that don't have access to sailing, that don't get out on the lake, and I'm going to get them out on the lake. That's it. That's all I knew going into it. And I financed it myself. I cashed out my retirement from North Idaho College, which wasn't that much money, relatively, but it was all of my money.
Yes, enough.
And the COVID relief, the bill,
the EIDO one.
What it did was it waived the early withdrawal penalty for IRAs, and so you could pull your retirement fund money without paying the 25% penalty.
Right.
You still have to pay income tax, but you do that whenever you pull your money out. So I liquidated all my assets. I pulled out all my money. I also had to pay for rehab, $30,000.
Really?
$1,000 a day for that rehab. So
holy smokes,
$30,000 for rehab. I owed the company in the Caribbean a bunch of money because they'd been financing our failing day sailing effort.
Yeah.
I had to pay that debt, rent the truck, and so I spent
everything was in.
Literally pushed all the chips in the middle and was I'm going to launch a charity out of my pocket, which looking back at it, was probably a bad, people don't do it that way for a reason. But I didn't care. I was so focused it was just this is what we're doing.
Yeah. I think too, that's what made it happen though, right? Because if you did know all the things you know now, you wouldn't have done it, right? Maybe I heard, I was
what a
listening,
terrible plan.
Right. But sometimes that's what it takes, It's weird because people get further down the line and they look back and they're like, what was I thinking? But that's what got you there, right? Too. So it's kind of, I don't know. It's like a twofold, right? It's you needed all those things to happen and that's what makes it unique, and putting everything into something that you believe wholeheartedly. And man, acknowledgement for spending $30,000 to go to rehab. That's insane. I didn't know that would cost that much money. And
it's a wide range. There's free rehab.
Right.
And then there's Betty Ford Clinic rehab, which is triple that. It's a lot more.
Right.
This was what we could put together. But
still to put that kind of money towards, going to rehab is one thing in itself, and then putting $30,000 of your own money towards it too, that shows major commitment to I need to, something's not aligned and I need to do something about it and going after that, man. So that's huge, man. I know I'm about almost a year and a half with no alcohol, basically sober.
Right on.
Yeah. So I've struggled my whole life with alcohol, and I'm lucky to be here, so many occurrences that are countless where I almost died or killed somebody, and so I'm just thankful to be on this side of it. I did a year before, went to Costa Rica, right at basically the year and a month mark. It was New Year's in Costa Rica, lit loose, and it went bad pretty much right away. We got ourselves into a situation that wasn't cool, and so, and it's kind of hard to imagine how you can ruin a trip to Costa Rica, but it can happen.
I can imagine it.
Yeah. If you've been, you can see how.
Yep.
Yeah. But, anyway, so I just want to acknowledge that, because I know from my personal struggle with it, how hard it's been for me. So, I always it's always nice to meet somebody that, had similar battles and is overcoming that battle, So,
I appreciate that. Yeah. It's a wild ride, and I'm incredibly fortunate to have people in my life that were able to step up and help me.
Yeah.
That were willing to step up and help me and loan me money and do a lot, take the phone calls and help me out and cover all the work that I didn't do and all these things that were people that cared enough about me to help me do that. But it's a driver now, I feel like I've had a very charmed life no doubt about it. And that at times I had a hard time accepting, had a really low self-image, like I don't deserve this. Why am I here? And now that's starting to fade as now I'm going into my third year running this charity and giving away sailing to all these people that would not be sailing if it wasn't for me. That now it's like, oh, okay, this is the walk that I needed to go on in order to get where I'm going now. And that's a hard thing in the moment because I can't see, like, at the time I could not have known how this was going to go or where it was going to lead me. But now it's such a driver, I'm still so charmed and fortunate. Like, one of the keys to staying clean that I would assume that you feel as well is purpose. If I feel like I have something to do, I have resources, I have access to people and things that a lot of people don't, a mountain of privilege in my life. And so what am I going to do with that? Yeah. And so doing something with it and feeling like I have a place and that I'm affecting my community in a positive way is the absolute cornerstone of my sobriety. I know that if I fell off the wagon, this whole thing
crumbles
would very quickly would just end. And I can't do that because of what all these people have given me. I've received over $100,000 in donations in 3 years, people giving me money that believe in what I'm doing, and I can't let them down. There's no way to my root of my being that I could betray all these people that have donated their money or their time or both to this mission because I decided to get drunk tonight. Not happening.
Yeah.
No way.
Your accountability supersedes anything that is tempting you from that darker, lower self.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like it's not even possible that I would do that. And that's finally where I got to, not so much because of accountability, like for people that follow my brand or whatever, but just accountability. Luckily, I found it within myself, I guess, like in a way that I just got so sick of myself and knowing what I needed to do, and I kept pushing it out. But I am still trying to find my purpose, and this is something that I've been talking about on the show a little bit, and my purpose is definitely, I know, lies in trying to figure out how to be at service to others, and like definitely leading a life that isn't attached to materialism and money. Like it's not about money for me anymore. I found money's not really the driving factor. Like I want to live a sustainable life, but I don't need excess, so I'm trying to eliminate excess. And I'm trying to live more outdoors, but I know that for me, my life needs to be somewhere in the world of service to a higher cause than just myself, and I've lived, I think, too much in that. And I think, a lot of people relate to this, but it's always just about self in our country, like the furtherment of myself. What do I have to do to make more money? What do I have to do to get that car? What do I have to do? It's all about your own needs, and it's not really about anybody else's needs. Primarily, that's how our culture is. Now, that being said, there's a lot of amazing people doing things like what you do. And the more people that we have in the world pursuing those passions that also can be passed along and given to others is what can make big waves changes, in the way we see each other and the way we feel about each other, and maybe inspire someone else to be like, you know what, I'm going to forego this pursuit of the benefit of self so that I can benefit others, which in turn makes you feel way better about yourself. And, like you actually, when you give to others, are giving to yourself. But getting to that place where you love yourself enough that you want to give to others is the tricky part, because I don't think most people want to give to others because they don't really know how to give to themselves, and I, in a way of a healthy way, like, because you have to love yourself before you can love others, and like getting down that path is tricky, and learning to love yourself has been, at least for me, I try not to speak for others, but for me, learning to love myself is a ongoing struggle, and the times that I am in, I have love for myself. That's when I start doing the good things, like volunteering my time, doing those things. But I've been in this cycle where I do good for a while, and then I get back in my head and things aren't good enough, or what, right? And so I'm figuring it out, I'm pursuing, but there is no way I'd be able to figure that kind of stuff out with alcohol or drugs in my life. There's just no way. And so even though I'm not like in this blissful state, and I'm not really for sure that I'm in my purpose, when I'm doing a podcast, I feel in my purpose. Like there's something special about what I do here. And I am trying to learn how to make this more a part of my life and also support my life. But I guess I'll just short it up now with, if I was drinking, there's no way I would be able to do this probably either, or even be seeking in my purpose, because I would be so clouded if alcohol was in my life. Like it's just, and I was just not a good person. You know what I mean? Like just the things, I'm not going to say terrible person, but it takes a lot to confront yourself to be able to be like, I'm not going to do this anymore. Everybody else says it's okay, or like wants to minimalize it, or, wants to normalize this, and it's not okay and it's not normal for me. And like, and I got to do right by me. And once you start that, then I really feel like that path to happiness becomes possible, and that path to your purpose becomes possible for me, at least. That's where I guess
Yeah,
my
I think
tangent
there's
is
a
on
lot
it.
there. No, there's a lot there. I think there's two things that, that resonate. Number one, for me, I had to admit that there was something wrong with me
Yeah.
before I could do anything about it.
Yeah.
It took a long time.
Mm.
And then once that settled in, I felt worse because I knew it was wrong and I was powerless to change it for a long time. Also, I mean, I started drinking with vigor when I was 15.
Yeah, me too.
And I didn't get sober till I was 39. So that's the majority of my life. And, I admit that I had a problem, and then it took me another, 10 years to ever get to the point where I took any action. But then once I removed that barrier, it was like, oh, the happiness was on the other side of it, and that's where the path towards this compassionate mission really came into view. It was like, in my head, and what I had learned through, I grew up in the Catholic Church and has since, really evolved into, I don't know if I'm like a card carrying Buddhist at this point, but I definitely resonate with the Buddhist philosophy of, the more I let go, the better I feel. And I feel that I'm connected to something much larger than myself, that I'm a part of something that's happening. And the more I contemplate these things like impermanence and the selfless nature of mindfulness and so on, the more it becomes clear that there's really only one thing for me to do, and that is to ease the suffering of the people around me. Period. Like there is nothing else that I have no desire to do anything else but to try to make those that are near me feel better. Because I'm gifted. I'm charmed for whatever reason. And I've been able to let go of, I don't know why, and it doesn't matter. I don't care why. I know that I have access to things that most people don't. So therefore, the only way I'm going to feel good is if I do the best possible thing I can with what I have, which is give it away.
Yeah.
It's that simple. But that was probably the most succinctly I've ever said that, to be honest, because it took years to distill it. To realize that I wasn't who I could be and deal with that. And then through this road, it's become crystal clear to me that the best I can feel about myself, which, as you said, is the key to the whole show, is to help somebody else out. That's it. So for me, it's like, well, figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Figure out how to make people feel better. And in my instance, it's take them sailing.
Yeah.
Take them sailing.
It's your medium.
It is. As others work in oils or clay, right? I work in this funny little boat that doesn't need a motor, that we can teach you how to make it move.
Yeah. It's, I've never been sailing and it sounds amazing, and, I don't know who really intrigued me about it. I actually have a friend I grew up with. He's down in the Caribbean right now sailing, and he's had some problems, as it goes, I guess, But also, I think that's what's kind of unique. Anyway, Travis Rice, the snowboarder, he sails a lot. He has a ship, a sailboat called the Falcor. And I was watching this documentary about him, and he talks about just this, the cycle of water, and he just likes being on the water at all times, whether it's snow or on the ocean. But the way he explained sailing, I was like, and just because I love snowboarding, I was watching this, and I was just like, man, the way he just said sailing is, like the way he explained it, and fishing and the whole thing of him living out on this boat, I was like, sounds really awesome. And like he just says it really just puts you in tune with nature, like being out there submersed. He's like, you just don't, the way he feels immersed as being one with the world is like heightened when he sails.
Right.
So
people ask me all the time, like, why sailing? Right.
Yeah.
And because I've done a lot of different stuff outside.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's two things. The one is simple, that it does not require a tremendous amount of physical ability. So sailing is more accessible than most other outdoor activities. You don't have to be fit. All you got to do is get you down the dock and on the boat. And we've done that with people with greatly limited mobility. For whatever reason. And you still get all the benefits. Whereas if you had a therapeutic snowboarding program, for example, well, you got to be able to ride a snowboard, which is going to eliminate a lot of people really quickly from the benefit that we get when we get to slide downhill on snow. It's rad, right? Yeah. But so the sailboat is so accessible. That's a big piece of it. But also it's the nature of it. And you can get this in, I think, a lot of outdoor sports, but, people call it flow, people call it whatever. I tend to find what the sailboat does is it holds you in the moment.
Yeah, present. Right?
Yeah,
okay.
And so you because of the dynamic nature of it, so you're physically engaged, your body, you're holding yourself on this boat that's leaning over, and so even though, again, you don't have to be terribly fit, you got to be balancing yourself. And you're moving you're adjusting the sail. You're trying to figure out, how do I make the boat move? And so your brain is completely engaged with the wind and the boat. And how can I turn the boat or tune the boat to the wind that I can't control? that is changing all on its own to try to get this boat to go where I want it to go. And can I harness this tool to use this thing that's way bigger than me in the breeze and get my boat to go where it can? And the reality is the answer is yes, you can. And I can show you how, but like it's to do that, you can't think about anything else. And so the just the nature of the activity relieves all this pressure of the past and the future, which is where my anxiety resides.
Yeah.
I have very little anxiety in the moment. Most of my anxiety or stress or negative, whatever you want to call it, comes from either stewing over something that happened either a minute ago or a decade ago, or worrying about something that may not actually happen and often will not happen.
Yeah.
My imagination can come up with the most bizarre scenarios,
For sure.
and that I can spend hours stewing on something that's literally impossible. Either of those things, the past or the future, melt away on the sailboat. And I really think that is the essence of why it's therapeutic in nature. Is because people get off the boat and they just feel better, and they don't often know why. And that's the best way that I can explain it, is because the activity by its very nature holds you in the moment,
Creates peace of mind.
and so you're not you're not worried about what you said to your girlfriend last night. You're not worried about whether or not your retirement plan is going to yield necessary funds to not work at the age of 68 or whatever. None of that is in your brain.
Yeah.
All you're thinking about is trying to get the sail adjusted, not fall off, and like get the boat going. And so, and it's that activity just brings this peace to people. They're just like, oh, I get out there and I just feel better. And it's like, well, that's what I've noticed. And there's that being the core of it. But then you cannot deny the backdrop either.
Yeah.
You know, you're in this natural environment. It's very humbling, feel small, feel that connection that Travis talks about, right? Of being a part of something. It's very primal and generally soothing to most people. And so this, you're held in this very natural place. You feel like you're a part of it, and you ought to be there, and the distractions of life go away. That is Nirvana-esque type these are moments of clarity that happen out there. And when I get to give that to someone who's dealing with trauma or dealing with a physical or mental handicap of some type, or PTSD or whatever, addiction, recovery, like anyone that I've found that's, you know, they have whatever challenges or whatever combination of those, right? They get relief when they come out sailing from that like crap that they deal with. And what I get is this sympathetic joy that I've found that, you know, I've become fairly desensitized to the scene because of the frequency at which I do it. So I don't often sit and bask in the beauty of Lake Pend Oreille as much as I probably should. What I do is sit and bask in the beauty of the smiling faces of the people on the boat. They're looking at the lake and I'm looking at them. And we all feel great.
Yeah. And so the energy of them and the experience and their energy is what uplifts you, you know, seeing that
Period.
That change in them. Or like something I heard you say is like, if they walk back up the dock lighter than they walk down it, then was a good day, right? That's the purpose. That's
the intention every time, is to feel better. And that's what's really evolved for me throughout my career, is that for the vast majority of it, the intentions were either training or vacation. This is what we're doing. We're here to show you a good time, or we're here to show you how to do it. That's what I spent my time doing. And that's really evolved now to, I want you to feel better. So it's now a healing intention. And we do that in a variety of ways. Some groups, it's more instructional in nature. Others, it's not. Sometimes it's very competitive. We go out there and race sailboats with the veterans and so on. And that really works for that crowd. And so I tune the experience to what I think will be most healing for that person or that group of people. And that's only been through 25 years in the field of being able to figure out, like, well, if we do it this way, I think it's going to help these folks. And then they leave, and then the next group comes, and it's like, these are completely different. So how can we tune the experience so that it will have the impact that we want on the next group? And that's been really hard at times, but also it keeps it interesting. I like variety. I don't want to run the same trip over and over again. I don't want monotony in my life. And so the even though we're out sailing every day in the summer, it's different every day because of what these folks bring with them. And can we figure out how to make this the best possible experience for them today, depending on where, we got to meet people where they're at. And that's what keeps it interesting for me, for sure.
Yeah, the challenge of creating something unique and catered for each group or individual keeps it fresh, and yeah. Ponderay is a massive lake.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I have a conspiracy about Ponderay and the submarines. They actually use aquifers from the ocean to get there. What do you think about this conspiracy? This is a side gen. I just want to know. Do you think it's that deep?
No, I don't.
Just teasing.
No, I met the Navy guys. They're cool.
Yeah. It's pretty wild to have submarines out there, though.
It's pretty fun. Crazy. Every once in a while, we're out there cruising around, and it's like, oh, look, there's a submarine. People. A lot of people don't think it's real. They don't believe me. But occasionally we have a sighting or an encounter. But it's kind of neat that the Navy's out there doing research, and that's cool. But it's a 1,200 foot deep lake. In the
blows
middle.
my
It's super
mind.
deep. Yep.
It's so deep.
That's fun.
I heard there's some cool. I've done a little scuba diving. I got my license or whatever, and just my first scuba diving entry level license, and did some at Coeur d'Alene. But I heard there's some really cool places out on Ponderay to visit. Some factory that's underwater out there now. People scuba dive at.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not a diver. And all the time on boats, I've got a deviated septum issue in my nasal ear canal somewhere in there. So I can't clear the air out of my head. So I have a hard basement depth of 12 to 15 feet.
Yeah.
And I've tried every trick.
Yeah.
And without surgery, I can't really dive. And so I've never been a diver. And probably won't be.
Yeah.
And so I don't know a lot about what the diving scene is there. But I mean, it doesn't take a stretch of the imagination to assume that there's some pretty rad stuff down there under the surface.
Man.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, 1,200 feet, man, that freaks me out, for a lake. It's just but it's but it's also so cool. We have such a big body of water there. And obviously it is perfect for sailing because it is so large.
It's pretty good. Yeah. I mean, lake sailing is challenging by nature as compared to, ocean sailing generally, not always, but you have more consistent wind.
Right.
And so the wind is harder to predict on the lake. And so it's tricky, but also it's here and there's no ocean swell and the water's not salty and so on. So there's a lot of advantages to being on the lake too.
People don't get seasick.
Which is sweet. Yeah, there's no swell really. Yeah. And even when Ponderay gets rowdy, when we get a wind out of the north, it'll get pretty rough. We have a sled. Like the boat I brought up here is not a lake sailing boat. It's a ocean sailboat. And so like we can be out in pretty stiff conditions on Pend Oreille very comfortably, which is nice.
That is.
Yep.
That's cool. So how did you come up with the name Dogsmile?
Yeah.
That one.
Dogsmile has been with me since I was a kid.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a little dog on the farm named Pepper. And we actually just named one of the, so I bought 2 boats since I've been started. We named one of the boats Pepper after this dog.
Oh, cool.
But Pepper would smile. So she would come out of the barn, like showing all her teeth, wagging her tail, and I would run. I thought the dog was going to bite me. And I remember Dad finally being like, no, she's just really happy to see you.
Yeah.
And so then I started making the face. So I would like do this and smile like the dog.
Yeah.
And it's in all these pictures. Mom wasn't a big fan. And so I had the dog smile with me since I was a kid. And, you know, when it came time when I found the boat, it was abandoned in a boatyard in Antigua. It had been left and was rotten and forgotten. It was black with mold and like not love at first sight. And it had like 3 names. It had a name on the side, then it had this big sponsor, and all the documentation said something else. And so it was this kind of didn't have a lot of identity. And it was like, well, we're going to name this boat. And it was like Dogsmile. We're going to call it Dogsmile. So I named the boat Dogsmile way before even the concept of the charity even came into my like reality.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it. We just want to make people smile like a dog that like doesn't care. And it's like you said it at the beginning, you know, it's a mindset, and it's posed a challenge on the front end because people think it's like a dog program, you know, right away. But it's coming around, you know. We and my one of my dear friends, Kate, who's a very accomplished graphic artist, she did the brand and everything, and it was a really cool process to do that with her, and we really have something unique, which is cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, Dogsmile Adventures. I was seeing it. I think probably you wore something during the WUFA class. I was like, what is that? And then I seen it again, I think, during the Avalanche course. And then when we went out, you were wearing one of the hats, I believe.
Right.
And I was like, all right, what is this? I see it on like multiple. I think your friend was wearing a hat too, maybe.
Right. Yeah, probably.
So, anyway, like to come to find out more about this is awesome. And also, it's in line with me trying to have more people from nonprofits on the podcast, as I've been saying that on previous podcasts, that my intention is to start, you know, using this platform for people from nonprofits to tell their story and how people can get involved. And I figure this is one way I can help give, you know, through my platform. And what I'm doing is like highlighting these kind of stories and these kind of businesses so that people have more information on how to get involved, or to send somebody that could benefit from a organization like Dogsmile Adventures. You know, maybe they know someone that has PTSD, or, you know, somebody, whatever it is, that maybe could get some relief from a sailing adventure. You know, and I correlate with the peace of mind or no mind, you know, is kind of what happens when you're in those moments. It's like no mind, you're just there in that moment. And I get that from snowboarding. And this season especially, like I've been addicted to it because I'm like, all I want to do is snowboard, because when I'm up there, I'm away from my thoughts or like whatever I'm, you know, running from, or whatever it is in life that's bothering me. You know, like when I'm on the mountain, it is just like I'm just there doing that thing. I don't have the negative thoughts bombarding me when I'm on the snowboard.
Right.
You know, and so that relief is super important, but it's also kind of led me to being a ski bum this season, but I'm okay with it, you know, because I love it. You know, I don't feel like I should have to regret any time I spend out there. But So just knowing you can get that from sailing is very intriguing. Also, I feel like from what I've heard with sailing too, like there's always something you're having to do in the moment on the boat a lot of times, right? Like even to like say you're on a trip, like there's always like some kind of maintenance or something with the boat. So you're always like consistently having to maintain the boat and
It's pretty engaging.
engaging.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. There's, you know, I mean, once you get it all dialed in, the more you do it, it'll become less to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, the reality is that consistent engagement is the cornerstone of the mindful experience that I just explained.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's a lot to do with it. I think that it would be. I appreciate the intention with the nonprofit platform because one of the biggest barriers on the front end of launching a program like this is simply awareness. Like, if people don't know that it exists, it doesn't matter how good it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So this platform is huge because anyone who's listening now can look it up and can reach out to me and figure it out. You know, and there's really two ways that we do this. We have, you know, basically a for-profit and a nonprofit kind of side to the house, even though the whole business is nonprofit. So, you know, you can either purchase a sailing trip, so you can buy a trip, and I tell people when they buy one, they're buying two. They buy one for them and one for me to give away.
Buy one, give one.
Yeah, which is a very common business practice. You're seeing this with like sock people and shoe people and other stuff, which is
like
it's cool, right?
Yeah, right.
And so I didn't invent anything there, but it works because people can say, well, so they get an experience, but they also get this fuzzy feeling of knowing that I'm going to take somebody out sailing tomorrow that would not be gone if they hadn't gone.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. And then the other side of the house, I work with organizations locally who serve various under-resourced populations. So I connect with partners who help veterans or help special needs community or abused women or whatever it is, addiction recovery programs. I connect with them and say, hey, let's get your crew out sailing. Let's get these people out.
Yeah.
And so they already work with that population, so they can help me tune that experience. They know more about what those folks, you know, need than I do. And so I can talk to them and we can figure out and come and try it, you know, and see if it even works. Some groups it's like, this doesn't really work, but most of them it does. So I connect with these community partners that are already serving these populations and say, hey, can we work together to provide this experience in addition to all the things you're already doing for these folks.
Yeah.
And so that's been the process by which I do most of the charity work is through these other organizations. But also I just get one-offs. I get a guy who calls up and says, you know, my sister's really going through a hard time in her life right now, and I know she would never buy this for herself, so I want to buy her a day out with you. And so they can do that. You know, so there's a lot of different ways to engage. And I've also found that those who can't afford it often they get a lot out of it too. They come out and relax and let go of all those things in their lives. And so it's they might say to me that, well, we're doing this, but it's really all about, you know, giving it away to these other people. And I'll be like, all right, man, let's go though.
Yeah.
Let's see how you feel in an hour as well. So I get to, you know, work the magic on those folks as well. But it's like you can purchase it or you can come out for free. And the key is that people just reach out. Like we haven't said no to anyone yet. Like if folks, you know, they're like, well, and there's a lot of pride in charity, which is funky. Pride's it's a hard thing to deal with, right? It's a tough wrestling match. And we get folks that resist the charity. They don't want to be given anything because of how they feel about themselves. And so I work with those folks too and say, well, pay what you can.
Yeah.
If it makes you, if the difference between you coming sailing and not coming sailing is the price tag, but you don't want to accept the free trip. I'm like, then give me $50 and we'll go.
Yeah.
I don't care. Like we fundraise aggressively to support the free programs and all these other things. And so I'll take what I can from people if that means they'll come out and do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been fun. And those conversations are always tricky to try to be respectful to people and be like, just take the free trip, man. It's not that simple, right? We all have our own self-image and so on. And so I work with folks and say, hey, pay what you can. If you feel like you want to pay something, then do it. Because I'll use that fund. I'll use that money to help give it to people that aren't paying anything to go.
Yeah.
And again, on the other side of the coin, I'll have someone who's a tourist from somewhere else passing through Coeur d'Alene or Sandpoint this summer, and they'll hear about the program and come out, and they might write me a check for $1,000 at the end of the day and say, this was awesome. Keep doing that. You know, give it to some local people here because they want to do something good while they're passing through that place, this place that is a vacation home for them.
Yeah.
So we're, it's this mix of trying to figure out as many ways to make it happen as possible. But at the end of the day, it's people smiling faces on sailboats. It doesn't matter whether they bought it or not.
Yeah.
The intention doesn't change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, therapeutic sailing. I love it. And I think the concept is amazing, man. And
thanks.
It takes somebody unique like you to make something like this come to life. And what was I thinking of? Oh, you were saying the buy one, get one, right? Or the buy an experience, give an experience. That is kind of a lot different than a product.
Mm-hmm.
Like to give someone a special experience that they purchase and know that I'm paying it forward because I have the money. This experience was amazing, and I'm super stoked for whoever else is gonna get this experience because I was able to pay, and it could be life changing for that next person and the person that paid. They might not expect it, but and even the person that's getting it for free, they might not expect it. Maybe nobody expects it in general. They're like, oh, yeah, we're going on a sailboat. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, like, okay, this is something else. This is something special. And just being in that, serene environment on the water. Also, too, like for people that I grew up like on the water skiing, and so and that's why people love lake life, being on the boat. There's something very special that happens when you're out on the water. Some people like to party hard out there, or they like to, be fishing or whatever it is, but there's something special that happens when you're out on a big body of water, or any water in general, really. Like it's just, there's something that obviously intrinsically is needed for life, and so something about when you connect with it just makes you feel at more wholesome or at peace, or something happens, at least for me. Every time I'm on water, it's a good day typically,
right?
So
yeah, it's there's a mountain of very scientific data that connects a positive feeling and physical, mental, all manner of health benefit to water.
What's one off the top?
Being near water, being submerged in water, even just listening to waves, like the sounds of water. There's all this science out there that backs up the concept of water in general being therapeutic. And what I tell people, some folks, they'll see therapeutic sailing and they're like, so we're out there doing therapy. And I'm like, not really. Like I'm not a therapist.
Yeah.
It's
the
lake
sailing
and the boat that do the work.
Yeah.
I don't have to say much.
Yeah.
I set the stage. We get out there and do the thing and let the water and the wind and the boat, they do the healing. They ask the hard questions is what I always tell people. Like it's therapy, for sure, but it's not the traditional sense where you're in the office or you're on the couch or whatever. But it is therapeutic. But it's in this like very wholesome and natural way. And, I think that, like I said already, the piece that I witnessed the most is the mindful state that it puts people in. That to me, that's the key. And I know there's a lot more there. I'm reading all the time about the therapeutic benefits as I'm trying to articulate it to get grant money and fundraise and make this thing happen. And so the more science I can put behind it, the better my case, right?
For sure.
As I'm competing for funds with all these other lovely people that are doing good things for folks in the community.
Yeah.
And so I need that, and I'm learning more and more about it, but I'm fortunate that mine is it's like so obvious. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty effective. Like people tend to feel better when they go do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to figure out how I can come on a Dogsmile adventure.
Yeah, I know a guy. We can make that happen.
Yeah. I know a guy
pretty high
too,
likelihood.
So, yeah, I would love to. I think it'd be really good to bring my mother too. I think it could be something really good for her. She loves Sandpoint in general, so maybe we could make a weekend out of it and get her out there and get her on the water. And I think she would have a blast. I think it'd be really good for her. Well, is there anything else you want to share about Dogsmile Adventure? We'll put it in the show notes, like your links and everything that you'd want people to find, for the website and Instagram and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think the last thing that I would say, and I always like finish up any conversation about this, is that if anyone that's listening either wants to go themselves or knows someone who could really benefit, please reach out to me.
Yeah.
Because we'll make it happen. It's we don't turn anybody away. So if the idea of a sailing experience sounds like it might make you feel better, reach out. It's that simple. Like we'll make it happen. We'll fit them into whatever program they fit into, and they either buy it or they don't. It doesn't matter. Yeah. We'll make it happen. So just encourage anybody out there to listen and to check it out. And follow us. The social media has its own, double-edged thing. We all are aware, but we really try to be a light in a dark place when it comes to the internet. Like we put out as all of our content. It's the best way that I can really thank everyone who's been a part of it. Yeah. Is anyone who's ever gone sailing or ever donated a dime or volunteered their time is a part of every single trip. Like it's all one thing. And so you can get a bit of that sympathetic joy by just jumping on our Instagram and being like, whoa, look at these kids that Jon took sailing the other day, and know that just by me sitting here, you're a part of that. Yeah. And that's the piece that's bigger than the boat. It's bigger than the lake. It's anyone that's looking at it can be like, and they get a little bit of positivity. They get a little bit of that therapeutic sailing from literally any distance possible. They can check in and be like, oh yeah, I donated to this thing. I met this guy in the Caribbean one time and now he's doing this thing. And I got a donation from some friends in South Africa the other day. They're like, hey, bro, we're following your deal. Like, it was just like, cool, and they feel great about it. And that's a fun thing about the following the channels. We're doing more and more YouTube stuff and Instagram and all that. And so people can follow it. And then we're doing this race, big race.
We had to talk about that. Sure.
And so that's kind of a good segue, I think.
For sure. Yeah. That was my next question.
So, a big part of Dogsmile Adventures is competitive sailing. So we race sailboats on Lake Pend Oreille 4 days a week. all summer.
4 days a week?
Yeah, we race a lot.
Oh, one other question I want to ask. Do you sail for Dogsmile 7 days a week if you can? If it's like booked for 7, or do you
Pretty much.
What days? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
I try to take Mondays off.
Mondays off. All right.
But I have more help this season, so I'm actually not going to run every single trip.
Okay.
Which is a big deal.
Yeah, it's huge.
Challenging for me to let go a little bit, you know. It's a different the business ownership, and it's a my old boss on the river said everything changes when it's your name on the boat, John. And boy, was he right. Wow, it's so different going from the being a guide to being the outfitter.
Yeah,
it's a very, very different emotional experience. But what I've found is that if this thing's gonna last, I have to scale it a little bit, and also I need to step off the boat a couple days a week so that I can
do administrative.
Yeah, I've got to run the business and spread the word and raise the money and so on, and also give myself a little bit of a break too, because it's exhausting,
recharge,
and recharge and so on. But so a big part of it is racing, and some groups respond really well to competition, others don't. But we've found that that it really works for some folks, and we cultivate a very kind. We're competitive, like we're out there to try to win, but more importantly is to be nice.
Yeah.
We take care of each other. We foster a very wholesome team. Nobody yells on the boat. We're very kind to each other. We make mistakes. We recover quickly because we're nice, and we're pretty good. Like I'll be honest, like our boats are in the mix usually, and I think a lot of that is because of the culture. A lot of sailboat racers are kind of mean. The captain's yelling at the crew, and it kind of sucks. It's not that rad. We don't do that.
Yeah,
we're super kind, and we take care of each other, and it works, and we tend to win. And so we've been stepping up our racing, and so we just signed up for the Race to Alaska a couple months ago, and the Race to Alaska is a boat race from Port Townsend, Washington, to Ketchikan, Alaska. 750 odd miles up there. And the only rules are that you can't have an engine. So like any floating craft is allowed.
And you can't kill another boat crew, right?
Right? Yeah, there's no cannibalism. At least it's not encouraged.
You can't use a cannon to sink a boat.
Nope. But so for this boat, I think this race started in 2015.
Yeah.
And it's become a pretty famous race.
Yeah.
So they get competitors from all over the world.
What is the race called?
Race to Alaska.
Race to Alaska.
Yep.
Straight up.
R2AK, you'll see, is what's all over the internet. And so we've been looking at this race for a couple years, and so we signed up 2 years ago, but then due to COVID, they didn't run the race. They ran a shorter race called the Washington 360 that we went out and did. We got third place in that race out of 60-some boats. Like we did really well.
Wow.
And so now we're back, and we get to do the big race in June. And we're Team Dogsmile, and the whole idea is to go do this thing to raise awareness about the program, is to get people talking about how sailing can be therapeutic, and so we're doing it to raise attention for Dogsmile for this program, but also it's about, like, my dream is for this thing to grow beyond Lake Pend Oreille. I would love it if we started taking folks and doing coastal sailing. And, the big dream is to cross an ocean under the Dogsmile flag, and take some people on adventures that just get, even bigger, that all kind of roots back in this program that we launched here on Lake Pend Oreille. But, so the race is June 5th, and, off we go.
Is it televised at all? Or,
It's all over the internet. Like, Race to Alaska has an incredible media machine. They're really funny. They're characters. And so it's like, this is a terrible plan. I think that's what it says on the website. Like, who would sail through these waters without an engine? Like, what are you thinking? And it's kind of funny.
I told my friend, I was over at my friend's house the other night, and I was telling him about this interview coming up. And my friend's wife was like, that sounds, what? Why would anybody do that?
Right?
I was like, this is awesome. I'm like stoked, so.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that's just like some badass stuff right there. It's just sailing.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man,
we're looking forward to it. We'll get to, we're taking my buddy Gabe's boat from Lake Ponderay over there to do the race.
Yeah.
It's a little 27-foot trimaran.
Yeah.
And because you can't have an engine, but you can outfit your sailboat with human-powered propulsion. So folks have rigged like rowing frames, like oars, on their boats so they can move them if there's no wind. And so what we have engineered, we didn't engineer it, but we've built and installed pedal drives for the sailboat. And so you sit in a recumbent bike seat and you pedal, and that's geared down to a model airplane propeller in the water. And so we can push the boat by pedaling, 2-3 knots, not very fast, but it's certainly better than being stopped. And so there's a cool engineering side of this race where people are like, you should see it on the dock pre-race, the contraptions that people come up with. It's amazing to try to outfit their boat to get it to move when there's no breeze. And there's boats that are more geared towards paddling or rowing, and then more geared towards sailing. Generally, the sailing boats win because if there's any wind at all, we can use our sails to get moving. But they always say like there's going to be a year when there's very little wind, and like a paddle craft will probably win if there's not breeze.
Straight Vikings.
But we're going with a light sailboat that sails really well, and but also we can push it with our pedals.
The crew?
We're doing it with 4.
4?
Which is a big decision because the boat's very sensitive to weight. The trimaran is very light by nature, and so most people run the boat that size with 3. We decided to run with 4 just to have the human currency, just to have another decision maker. Everybody gets a little more sleep, and we found that even though we're heavier, it works for us to have that 4th person. So 4 people. We're packing for 7 days, which is fast, but that's what we're going for. We figure if we run out of food, we'll pull into a town somewhere along the way and get some food if we need it. But we're packing for 7 days. People have done it in like 4 if it's really windy. There's been folks that have done it really fast, but 7's kind of an average for the front of the group. Yeah. And so that's what we're aiming for.
7 days.
Yeah, Race to Alaska. Check it out. There's actually a movie online, Race to Alaska movie that's on YouTube that explains the whole thing and talks about the culture. And
so I want to follow you when you do it, man, and just see how it goes.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. They put a little GPS on all the boats, and so you can like live updates every day, so you can see everybody's progress up through the Inside Passage, and you can tell like who's making moves and who isn't. And there's a lot of decision points in there. And so it's a pretty cool fan experience. And they do a great job with like videos and stuff along the way and highlighting the teams. And that's why, again, we're doing it through the nonprofit so that we can get some exposure for our program.
Yeah, I think that's huge.
And try to get some folks that, might be interested in donating some money to help us do this. So
I mean, that's super smart. People that love that world and follow that world hear about you and what you're doing, and they're going to be, and I would imagine a lot of people in the sailing community are probably doing pretty well, There's
a lot of money on boats.
Right.
For sure.
So
and a lot of really generous and kind people. Yeah. And so it's a matter of us connecting to them, and saying, hey, help me give this thing away that we all love so much. Yeah. And I've found a lot of boaters, a lot of sailing folks that have been like really generous with their money to try to help me do this.
Yeah, it's just been cool. Give somebody that experience, that glimpse of what it's like. One thing I was going to mention too is like I grew up on the water a lot, but as I got into my adulthood, I didn't spend as much time like slalom skiing because that's what my dad did, slalom skiing. And I like just didn't really have friends with boats like that anymore, and so I like over the last years have really realized how much I miss being on the water. I just am not on it as much as I want to be. Like I get on it, but it's like I want to be on it like I can be in the winter with snowboarding, and it's so my point being is that someone that maybe has never had an experience on water ever, potentially, not like what sailing can offer or just being on a boat in general can offer, and having that first experience that they may have never ever got if it wasn't for Dogsmile, that's huge, man, because like I said, water is healing. Like being out there is something very special. And so like to give that person that opportunity, that's something special, man.
Yeah,
So
thanks. The reality is that, you know, the vast majority of the people that live in this area don't get out on the water.
exactly. It's
For whatever
very,
reason.
yeah.
You know, there's a financial barrier, there's a time, there's all these different things that get in the way. And I get folks all the time that like are like, man, I've been here my whole life and I've never been on this lake.
Yeah.
I hear that often. And
yeah.
so it makes me super happy. I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, well, you're here
so
now,
cool, man.
you know, and you get to be out there. And there's that, you know, I definitely have a soft spot for the financial barrier.
Yeah.
You know, boats are expensive. Access to the water costs money and time. And so there's a lot of folks who are excluded. And, you know, this piece really goes back to my time in the Caribbean. You know, when you're driving a very expensive yacht through poverty,
Yeah.
it messes with your brain.
Yeah.
You sit there like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, you know, and it's not,
The cost of this yacht could feed these people
I
or
could
whatever,
make
right?
so much difference,
Yeah.
you know, and it's not that simple,
No.
but I was like, I don't want to do that,
Yeah.
you know? And so let's get some people out on these boats that wouldn't be, you know, otherwise. But it dates back to those experiences of bringing boats into places and looking at the people and going, they're never going to get on a boat like this ever, you know, and it's not up to me to fix and doesn't even mean that they want to, but I do feel this like calling to like, let's take the people out who wouldn't be without us.
Yeah. Do you have a thought or mission to do a Dogsmile Adventures outfit in the Caribbean at all?
I think what we will be there soon, but mainly in the fundraising sense. So we run an auction every December where we auction off sailing experiences to raise money for the program.
Oh, cool.
Yep. So I'm actually leaving for Mexico in a few days. We sold 2 7-day charters in Mexico this year. And so folks, you know, they bid on the trip and then I go take them on a charter sailing trip.
Oh,
and
man. Cool.
we use that and we get the boats often donated or at a discount. And so we are able to make a profit for the program by selling these experiences.
Sweet.
And so I'm working with a few connections actually right now to offer a Caribbean experience in the auction next year.
Got you. Yeah.
So that we can sell that to some lucky folks who will get to go have a pretty rad trip, but also in doing that, we'll fund
You're funding.
weeks of programming up here
That's so cool.
for folks.
So Dogsmile Adventures is more in this auction scenario. It's like you're selling actual adventures in other places in the world too,
Yeah.
which I just see adds a deeper element layer to it all. That's so cool, man. Where are you
It's
going in
fun.
Mexico this trip?
It's a big deal. We've got one of my board members has got a boat down there, and so the boat is in Barra de Navidad, which is just it's like south of Puerto Vallarta. A ways, we're gonna sail it up. We're gonna run a trip. We're gonna sail it up across the Sea of Cortez and into the Baja, actually. So we're gonna run a week in the Sea of Cortez out of La Paz. And then we'll run a second week from Puerto Vallarta down the west coast of Mexico back to Barra. So I've got the 2 trips, and then I've got some of my good mates from here helping me do the delivery work to move the boat around in between on the parts of the water that we don't have guests. So yeah, we gotta. It's a 30-day trip for me. By the time I get home, it's a long one. Yep.
30 days. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing, man. Well, thank you for your time, you know, and thank you for coming and sharing your story and telling us about Dogsmile Adventures. I'm super stoked to see where it goes and what happens with your Alaska race. Man, you're just, you know, really happy we did this. So do you have
Me too.
anything else you would like to share and any shout outs?
I would just say, you know, thanks to you for sure. It's just fun you just never, my first boss in the Caribbean said, you never know who's going to walk down the dock. He said that to me. And just to be open and just, you never know. And I feel like, you walked into my classroom in my other job teaching for the Avalanche Center.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that would manifest into this experience, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that would be what I would leave people with, is just to be open. You never know who's going to walk into your life. And I'm a big fan. Have you ever heard the book, The Alchemist?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The message from the alchemist being like, if you're on the path, the universe will go out of its way to keep you on the path. And so that can come in the form of, moments where you might feel lucky, and it's like, well, what is that? Notice that, that's the universe giving you a nudge in the direction that you're going, usually. But also I found that people tend to appear when I need them. And if I notice and engage with compassion, that's how so much of this has happened. It looks from the outside looking in, it's just this matter of perspective, but it's like, oh, John's doing all these things.
He's making it happen.
He's making it happen. But from my point of view, it's like, it's just a spider web of community. That's it. It's like, oh yeah, I met this guy, Bobby. He came into my wilderness first aid class, end up on his podcast. Somebody heard the podcast. This happened, that happened.
Yeah.
Bobby came out sailing later. And who knows what interactions will come from this one. And that's just been it's a beautiful realization that there's a connection between all of it. And if I just allow it to happen and continue to do it in a compassionate way, that it'll work itself out.
Yeah. I try to practice that belief, and having faith that when you have an intention that you feel your heart is really calling you to, that it'll work out, and trying not to over compulsively worry about how it's all going to work, just knowing that it's going to work. I struggle a lot with that though, but I have gotten better over the years, and you never know what's going to shift your perspective. I've actually, over the last few days, I've been having some shifts energetically and stuff, but like today, this podcast, like I had like some like shivers in my body, just feeling like I'm like, all right, there's something here that I'm doing right now in this moment that is important. I can't put a finger on what it is or why it's important, but it feels important, and so I'm just, I'm going to walk out of here with a bigger smile than I came in with, So,
right on. And the key is to notice, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole practice.
Yeah.
Is to notice. And you can only control what you can control, but like to feel it, like, oh, this feels good. Well, it feels good. Do more of that.
Yeah.
It's that simple. Right?
That's simple. And that's where I'm
hard.
trying. It's yeah, it is. But I've come to find it's as hard as you make it,
Yeah.
And it's always just about remembering, oh, I'm making it hard. Most of the time it's you that's making it harder than it needs to be.
I get in my own way more than anyone else gets in my way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just
Combined.
reminding, like, hey man, get out of your own way. It's all good. Let go. Detach. Can't control everything. And what you can, don't be too aggressive and forceful. Like sometimes you're trying to make something happen and it's just not happening. And that's when you got to like sit back and be like, okay, that's all right. And I'm just going to go think about this for a bit and come back to it or whatever it is. And as I've gotten older, I've luckily been able to start understanding that more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
some of the urgency goes away over time, for sure.
Yeah.
For me anyway, it has.
Yeah. I feel that same way. The other thing too that I read, and I'm reading this book, I think it's called The Path with Heart, Jack Kornfield book. sounds like we probably have a lot of same interests and philosophies, like with Buddhism and stuff. But one thing that I've come to realize is like I am very blessed with what I have, and I don't need everything that I have. And this is also where I realize like I don't need to be a millionaire or like these things. Like if I end up there, that's cool, but I don't need that. Like I don't have to be that person to feel successful or to be happy or whatever it is. But, as much as I've made so many foolish decisions throughout my life, I've still been afforded the opportunity to be whoever I want to be and to still, live in my purpose. And getting to the place that, each day is really a gift, and like it's hard to understand that sometimes. Those sayings can be so cliche or like, okay, yeah, dude, like, oh yeah, every day's a gift. All right, bro. Like, but like when you really sit in it and realize like, okay, today's a gift. I have these resources. What am I going to do with it today? Like how am I going to live my life today? And that's something that's actually kind of hit me just recently within the last 2 weeks again, where I've really kind of lost sight of that. And now I'm back in that. And I'm like, dude, like you have a gift. You have this podcast. You have these things that you should be very grateful for. And they can be used to better your environment in the community. And that's really why I want to have nonprofits on, because for me, I don't see other media resources locally. And I'm not saying they don't exist. I think there's some people within our podcast community and what Brennan does with Spokecast, but really highlighting individuals that are in the trenches trying to make our community a better place. Not just the cool people that have cool businesses. I want to highlight the people that are really trying to make a difference too. And I want to talk to everybody, but a big important part of me learning how to help others is talking with others that are already doing it. I feel like that's like this podcast is kind of my education in how I can make city chapters more involved with community work and service and helping others, is by sitting here on this platform talking with individuals that they're doing it. They've made it happen. And like we said earlier in the podcast, once you sit and talk with these people that have already been down the path and are already doing it, you see the possibilities. You see how you can actually make it happen.
I listened to the book A Wise Heart by Jack Kornfield.
Yeah.
When I was sailing the Dogsmile across through the Bahamas on the way here.
Yeah.
I listened to that book on that trip.
Yeah.
Yep. I remember it well. Had a massive impact on me as I was listening to his voice and sailing through the night across the sea. It was a very impactful read.
Yeah.
Listen for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the way he writes. My brother read the book and he was like, dude, you should read this book. I think it'll really help you with, some things. And it definitely has. And I'm just started in it, I'm only like 4th chapter in. So.
All right. Nice. Yeah. Good. Cool.
Well, cool. All right. We'll wrap it up.
Yeah. Thanks,
right.
Bobby.
Yeah. All right. I'm Bobby J. This is City Chapters Podcast. And that was chapter 21 with Jon Totten from Dogsmile Adventures. Till next time. See y'all.